Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks again for joining us for Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. Up on the breakup map here, all blue on the rivers south of the Brooks Range here, all the way down to the Susitna there in the Copper River, as well as the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and less ice now in the rivers up there over the northwest, like the Noatak, except down here at the end, still an area of mostly ice right through there. And now the North Slope rivers, well, unknown on the purple part, but there are some open areas now on out to the north there along the Colville. Moving on to the fire danger, not too much, some areas of here over the central Tanana Valley, Copper River Basin, and possibly here over the northern Lynn Canal area, and that's about it fire danger wise. So moving on to satellite imagery today, a lot of moisture, frontal system here approaching the southwest coast, rolling right on in today with rain, some of that extending back into the southeast interior to a certain extent, and then some scattered showers and also scattered thunderstorms developing this afternoon, mostly from actually across the central interior and along this boundary right through here, a little more extensive area of showers there, demarcating the colder air back to the north and northwest, and the warmer conditions here down to the southeast, with this flow coming up from a more southerly direction, and then the southwesterly flow there coming around an upper level system up off the Arctic coast, and that keeping clouds, mostly cloudy conditions, and flurries, fog, and lower flying conditions as well up there. And see some of that kind of dropping on in and really not doing much, but along the mountains breaking up, some areas of sunshine there from the Brooks Range into the Seward Peninsula. Yukon Delta, mostly sunny this afternoon, and then get on down toward Bethel and along the Kuskokwim River, back into mostly cloudy skies. That extends down across Kodiak Island and into Cook Inlet, with still showers going on today along the North Gulf Coast, and then more of a break out to the west toward the Pribilofs, and the next front showing up quite vividly here, especially over the northwest Bering and the main low center back there toward Kamchatka Peninsula. But weaker conditions here, or not too as strong, both wind-wise or precipitation-wise here over the western Aleutians. And rolling that through again, you can see it pushing eastward, but the low center hanging back toward Kamchatka there as the front extends outward, and that usually results in a weakening frontal boundary. And for tonight, looks like that will push eastward here, with the main front coming east of Shemya, but still coming very close to Amchitka, with the most of the bulk of the moisture, just some scattered moisture down here, areas of light rain, fog in the extensive area up to the north toward the main system where the frontal boundary is stronger toward the Russian Far East. Otherwise, basically weak high pressure or weak ridge here from the Arctic southward across eastern Bering Sea to 1,012 millibar center. That will dominate the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula. So dry conditions, light winds, variably cloudy to mostly cloudy to just outright overcast for the Pribilofs northward there to the Bering Strait. And actually for today's map, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. The showers, isolated thunderstorms here from the east or from the western interior eastward all the way to the border, right through here, but really no big outbreak going on. Kind of just isolated to widely scattered, and also showery conditions as well. In the Arctic coast, same pattern up there with the low clouds, fog, flurries, temperatures a little chilly, not too bad for this point in May though. And then this system bringing the wind and rain in across the southeast coast. Heaviest amounts up here in the north with the strongest winds right along the central coast area on down off the coast. But that'll be rolling on in tonight a little bit there. But rain not quite as heavy over toward Ketchikan, Metlakatla, and Stevens and those areas. And then most of the shower activity developing over the western Alaska Range or over the mountainous terrain here, and a little more extensive there, southern Kenai Peninsula, northward into western Prince William Sound. And then again, thunderstorms along this boundary up here associated with a 1,006 millibar low there just south of the Central Brooks Range. And that area will continue. Now I'll go to tonight, into tonight there. Lose the thunderstorms later on. Showers continue, cloudy skies, no change to the Arctic coast up there. Still kind of an east-northeast wind flow, becoming a little more northerly here for the Chukchi, but really light winds here along a ridge axis extending right along the coastline. And back to the west, you can see the gale force winds here will be mostly approaching the Pueblos and then extending back to the northwest with at least small craft advisory winds, though, associated with a front in advance of it, with the rain coming across the central Aleutians tonight. Turning showery late tonight, early tomorrow morning for AKwx, with the winds turning westerly. And then gale force winds again, and tighter gradient there for the far western Aleutians with a lot of showers. Otherwise, variable clouds here. Should stay dry. Kodiak Island. Some of this moisture will be quite close to the east side there, Ozinki and the city of Kodiak. May see a little bit of light rain possibly, or it'll just be cloudy, but definitely with this moisture coming up, rain along the North Gulf Coast, increasing throughout the night tonight and on toward morning, and a little more convective here up across the Alaska, or as it approaches the Alaska Range, Copper River Basin, and then increasing wind and rain as this thing rolls up and approaches the coast there. Gale warnings for tonight and tomorrow there along the coast, and even over Stevens Passage, mostly tomorrow for that area, with rain heaviest north coast on up across the northern panhandle, lighter on down toward the Queen Charlottes, but a pretty wet day and windy conditions for the southeast coast for tomorrow, or for tonight. And then for tomorrow, slowly moving in here, probably see a little more rain than what I've got depicted ahead of that front there. So periods of rain here, southern southeast coast. Minimum gales, but higher gusts, maybe up to 45 knots on the gusts in advance of the front. And Stevens Passage calling for southeast gusting to 50 knots in the marine forecast there. So definitely wind a much more of a factor than the rain will be, although the heavier precip up here to the north will definitely be more significant than it will be down to the south. Up to the Yakutat area, rain over toward Cordova becoming lighter, and probably getting into Turnagain Arm, covering all of Prince William Sound up to Valdez, but mostly along the Coast Range and south of the Copper River Basin. Otherwise, the interior, mostly cloudy skies, about like we saw today. You'll see again tomorrow with partial clearing in areas, scattered showers, developing afternoon thunderstorms, and some of the taller clouds that pop up here anywhere over the interior, especially along this boundary that remains in place from the southern part of the eastern Brooks Range on back down toward the southwest coast. And then that front weakening now, and the precipitation field becoming a little narrower, but looks like definitely rain for the Pribilofs, fog, low clouds, IFR. They'll extend southward to the Fox Islands. As you can see, not much of a gradient in advance of that front, so don't look for a whole lot of wind. And the Arctic coast, possibly a little less in the way of flurries, but still mostly cloudy skies. Partial clearing up there over the northwest, Shishmaref in toward Kotzebue, maybe the Kelly area, and that could extend even to the eastern Arctic coast. Kind of an optimistic forecast, dropping clearing in up there. Otherwise, breezy conditions with probably some scattered showers here for the Aleutians, and a little more extensive area precipitation rotating around the south side of that still fairly strong low center that's stuck up there along the Russian coast. And then for Monday, that kind of splits into two centers back there, weakening to about the mid-90s, the mid-990 millibar range. But what that does, with another one coming up from the southwest, they're still not really affecting the Aleutians here. May spread some rain into the western areas to a certain extent. Otherwise, southwest flow across the Bering here turns westerly into the interior, and surges of moisture and showers will be riding along in that flow. Showers to the Pribilofs, back down toward the Aleutians with west-southwest winds, 25 knots, small craft advisories just about everywhere, becoming lighter back to the west as this approaches from the southwest. And it looks like mostly cloudy showers here for much of the interior. Not really a wide outbreak of showers, but except for possibly here with eastern Tanana Valley, a little more extensive with that 998 millibar low there just north of Eagle. And so again, isolated thunderstorms in this whole mess here over the interior. Mostly cloudy, chance of showers, chance of some sunshine here, south central Alaska, as well as the North Gulf Coast looking pretty dry at this point in time. Could see some sunshine, and that front finally kicks through the panhandle. Weak trough swings in. Showers definitely for Monday there, and then probably a break Monday evening and overnight as this one slowly follows in behind. Temperatures down across the panhandle today, upper 40s to lower 50s, mid 50s, south central Alaska, Copper River Basin, westward out to Bethel, 57 there at Kiana, or that's not Kiana, at Marshall, with 61 at McGrath, 60 degrees in Fairbanks today. Eagle at 62 and a 58 at Fort Yukon, 39 Anaktuvuk, Battles at 54. And temperatures right around 30 there along the Arctic coast, some a little higher like 32 at Kaktovik, and then down to 30 at Point Cape Lisburne. Point Hope was missing. Upper 30s across the northwest here, 52 though at Ambler, and then 50s all the way down to Bethel with 40s now instead of 30s out along the coast, and a 39-degree reading at Gamble, warmed into the lower to mid 40s for the Pribilofs, 40s for the Aleutians, but Shimia down to 39. And for the lows tonight, mild here from southwest coast northeastward. That'll be the warmest zone for the interior, except for the panhandle. See lower 50s, pretty even milder down that way. And then lower 20s there, maybe falling into the upper teens, north slope, possibly the Arctic coast. Tomorrow afternoon, very nice weather, mid 60s to lower 70s, warmest location, central Tanana Valley, living good up across the Yukon Flats. Could rise into the lower 70s there in that kind of grayed out area. Otherwise near 60, falling into the 40s for the coast, Aleutians, and upper 20s for the Arctic coast, 50s for the panhandle. Flying weather tomorrow, IFR along and north of the Brooks Range on out to the east side of the coast there, eastern Beaufort Sea coast. IFR hugging the coastline, extending westward up to the North Gulf Coast, marginal into the Prince William Sound. Another batch here right off the southwest coast, and then areas of, but improving farther back to the west for tomorrow afternoon. That edges northeastward and eastward here, so Nunivak Island comes under the influence of IFR as well as Cape Neuanem and the south side of St. Lawrence Island. Not too bad there, maybe some IFR on the extreme eastern Arctic coast. Marginal for all of the panhandle. IFR there roughly west of Elfin Cove to about Cape Yakataga. And for passes, Anaktuvuk, VFR, same forecast for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, looking good tomorrow. VFR conditions, rainy, same forecast, windy. But Isabel, moisture flowing northward, becoming marginal throughout the day and into the afternoon. Same forecast for Mentasta. And for Tanita, staying VFR. Portage, marginal VFR, likely some IFR at times on the eastern approach, with Chilkoot and White both in the marginal area. For the freezing levels tomorrow, 2,000 feet with that cold upper low there off the Arctic coast. So colder conditions there at the surface down along the Brooks Range. And otherwise 4,000 feet here for the interior, maybe up to 6,000 feet, or it will be at 6,000 feet over the southern southeast coast. And kind of a gradient now out over the central Aleutians, but cool air kind of covering most of the Bering Sea. Icing here approaching the southwest coast, extending to the Alaska Peninsula, and a widespread area here over the southeast coast, up along the North Gulf Coast, and up across the Copper River Basin, spilling up in toward the Brooks or the Alaska Range. And for the winds aloft, southwest jet here, carrying a lot of moisture into the panhandle. Some of that rain could be heavy at times there. And 9,000 feet, pretty good winds to go along with that. 35 or 30 to 40 knots, light over the interior, light tour. Southeasterlies 20 to 35 with this system, but stronger westerlies, west-northwesterlies there, along and just north of the Aleutians. Same pattern at 3,000 feet, but the winds are a little lighter. Low here in the Gulf, 30-knot winds up along the North Gulf Coast. 35 for the Aleutians, light over the interior, no wind for the Arctic coast, and southerlies 30 to 35 there, just off the panhandle. Turbulence, occasional moderate or occasional light to isolated moderate chop here Cordova maybe, all the way down toward Dixon Entrance, and all of the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
One of the major challenges facing us is how to shield astronauts from radiation. Research tells us that some metals are good shields, but weight will be a major consideration. For example, in order to keep within weight limits, only thin skins could be applied to a craft, which will allow too much radiation into living quarters. But adding thick layers of radiation blocking material could make the craft much too heavy. An added concern is once the atoms inside the metal skin are hit by incoming particles, they would bounce around like billiard balls, causing secondary particle shedding, which could in fact be as dangerous to crews as the original radiation. One solution currently being discussed is the use of hydrogen-rich plastic such as polyethylene, which is the same material found in garbage bags. Hydrogen is a good radiation-blocking element, and some hydrogen-rich plastics can be formed into lightweight, strong shields that are about 10 times stronger than aluminum. This is just one of the innovative designs that are currently being reviewed for use in space.
The whole goal in the long run is to have our astronaut crews be as healthy as possible throughout the entire mission. Not just survive the mission, but be as healthy and thrive during the mission.
Another tool researchers are using to help monitor radiation is something called the phantom torso. This is a simulated human torso that houses real bones and plastic organs that measure the amount of radiation to which an astronaut is exposed while in space. Let's go back out to Tonya, who spoke with Dr. Francis Cucinato, NASA's chief scientist for radiation research.
In most science fiction films, threats to space travelers usually deal with aliens, asteroids, and a host of other menaces. But in reality, one of the biggest threats to space travelers is in fact radiation. That's why it's imperative that NASA researchers focus on finding ways to shield astronauts from exposure. I spoke with Dr. Francis Cucinato at NASA Johnson Space Center to find out more.
Shielding, one of the things you should think about is that you don't have to shield the entire spacecraft, that you can shield just portions of a spacecraft where you could locate astronauts during a solar storm. The solar storms last from 1 to 2 days, but the peak of the radiation is only over about an 8-hour time frame. So you can save a lot of cost at launching mass by locating the astronauts in one place within a spaceship or a habitat on the moon or Mars. And then in that localized region we can have extra shielding, and there we can also use better materials. So the materials like aluminum are a typical spacecraft material. They're very sturdy, easy to use, but they're not the best materials for shielding. So in these localized areas of a spacecraft, we would plan on using a material with a lot of hydrogen in it. So hydrogen turns out to be the best material for stopping ions as they pass through the material.
Can you explain how radiation will affect the astronauts?
One of the things that's important when you look at radiation effects is that it's a game of risks. So like any other risk, like driving your car or taking an airplane flight. So you really have to stop and say, well, is it worth it to take the risk? So when you look at that question, there's two things that come to mind. One is, what am I doing? So you think, well, I'm going to discover life on Mars. So it's obvious that you will take risks. So you'll accept the risk from radiation. But the other part of the coin is, what is the risk? Because now NASA or the families of an astronaut, they want to know what the risk is, and some of the astronauts too want to know what the risk is. On a space shuttle mission, the risks from radiation are very small. So even if we're off in our predictions by a lot, there's really no outcome to that, or bad outcome. When you go to the moon or to Mars, we know that the risk from radiation is going up. So now the point is that the accuracy of our prediction becomes more and more important as the risk is expected to get higher and higher. This is the basic physics and understanding of these processes has been developed along with the knowledge from us understanding space radiation effects.
What are some of the preventative measures you're taking for astronaut safety?
We're looking into ways to prevent radiation effects through countermeasures. And the key to countermeasures is knowledge. So if we look again at this problem of going from genetic damage or tissue damage to late effects like cancer, we believe that the way you can prevent this is understanding the whole problem from top to bottom and then looking for an opportunity to intervene and prevent the cancer from growing. So that this has obvious benefits on Earth. One area we're interested in is that it turns out that the ends of chromosomes, which are called telomeres, if they're lost through a radiation event, the deletion of the telomere, that this is one of the mechanisms that causes cancer. So we're looking now at mechanisms that you could use with the drugs or other biological countermeasure, biochemical methods to prevent the loss of the telomere from radiation. But telomere loss is not only occurring with radiation damage, it's also occurring from cigarette smoking and poor diet. So there's a whole bunch of other areas where protection of telomere damage it would be applicable on Earth.
How do you not get frustrated dealing with so many unknowns in your research?
Well, that's the most fun part of the job, is that you're doing something that's unknown, it's new, so it's sort of like discovering, a voyage of discovery, like going into space, that you're trying to look at what's really happening to people when they're exposed to radiation at the very most basic level. You have to really go down to DNA, the physical interactions of radiation with DNA, and how DNA, when it's changed, leads to disease. So these are really basic science questions, and we've come to understanding that that's the only way we really can protect the astronauts, because if you use a method that's empirical, meaning there's a lot of assumptions and things that you really don't know, but you'll just skip over that you can actually make very life-threatening mistakes in the end. So you really need to go to this very basic approach and understand the whole problem from top to bottom.
That's it for this episode of NASA's Destination Tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steele McGonigal.
And I'm Kara O'Brien. For all of us here at NASA, we'll see you next time.
Welcome back. Look for gales here along the coast, 30 to 35 knots with gusts of 42, maybe as high as 50 knots to go with it. And even Stevens Passage here, gale warnings flying tomorrow with gusts of 50 knots. Small craft advisories on up through Lynn Canal from the southeast. Much lighter winds in store for Monday, down to 10 to 15 knots here, mostly southerly direction out along the coast. Seas coming down to 9 to 10 feet. Lighter winds also for Stevens Passage, 20 out of the southeast, and then small craft advisories in the afternoon, northern Lynn Canal, 25 knot winds, 5-foot seas. Prince William Sound tomorrow, northerlies predominantly or variable to north at 15, seas 3 feet. Northwest, Cook Inlet at 10, west 20 for Kachemak Bay, small craft advisories across the Barrens and the North Gulf Coast, to northwest becoming north and then east there for the Middleton Island zone. And then for Monday, southwest flow here, Chillicothe Strait, Kodiak Island, right up Cook Inlet, small craft advisories, and it turns southerly at 25 north of the Forelands. Southeast 20 Prince William Sound, 20 knot winds for the North Gulf Coast. Out west, Bristol Bay, west 15, small craft advisories here on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, but 20 knots southwest turning west towards Sitkinak. Monday forecast, west-southwest 20 knots on the north side of the peninsula, and small craft advisories on the south side. And then for the Aleutians, we've got for the Fox Islands, mostly southwest, at 25 knots with 7 to 10 foot seas. And central Aleutians more westerly there, Adak and Atka 25 to 30 knots, gradually increasing southwest 35, maybe even as high as 40 knots out towards Shemya. And then for Monday, those come down to 25 knots out there and even a little lighter here between Kamchatka and Adak, but small craft advisories there for the central Aleutians. Pretty uniform wind pattern from there eastward across Unalaska Island, all at 25 knots, seas running 8 to 10 feet. For the southwest coast, south to southeast 20 knots, small craft advisory St. Lawrence Island, down into the northern Bering Sea from the southeast, and then south 25 for the Pribilofs. Monday, no change there, south 25 knots, 11 foot seas for St. Paul, St. George. Lighter winds now down to 15, but still out of the south for the Bering Sea. Up along the Arctic coast, eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, light winds east to northeast at about 10, and then turning northeast here, picking up to 20 knots to the western coast, and from Cape Thompson southward down to 15. And then the outlook for Monday, coming back up to about 20 knots there, but not too bad, no small crafts are out at all, with 4 foot seas up to Cape Beaufort. And then the light wind conditions continue out of the northeast at only 10 knots over toward Demarcation Point. And for tonight, again, rain for the panhandle there, heavy at times with gusty southeast winds, gale force along the coast, and the heaviest rain will be from the central coast up to the north there, with lighter amounts overspreading the southern areas, and rain coming up and increasing along the North Gulf Coast, expanding westward in across the Kenai Peninsula. Showers to the north breaking out, still the shower condition up there in the interior areas, and the next front pushing eastward, driving eastward, bringing a chance of rain to the Pribilofs late tonight. Definitely rain there tomorrow down across the eastern Aleutians. Scattered showers today, much like today over the interior. Isolated thunderstorms, less flurries along the Arctic coast. Wet conditions North Gulf Coast all the way down to Dixon Entrance, with those gale force winds along the coast and for Stevens Passage, and then lighter winds with just a remnant of a trough here, with still a lot of showers and mostly cloudy skies. Next system off to the southwest, mostly cloudy, showers central southern interior, not too bad North Gulf Coast, a few sun breaks, and that's a look at
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.